Full episodes of politics and policy content like the program you just listened to are available to stream with the PCN Select app. Discover other shows like the Capitol Preview, On the Issues, candidate interviews, and more. To learn more about PCN's mission and to support PCN with a donation, visit PCNTV.com. This link and others can be found in our show notes. We appreciate your support.
Welcome to Journalist Roundtable. I'm Phil Beckman. Today we're joined by Tirzah Christopher, Capitol Affairs investigative reporter with PennLive Patriot News. In Harrisburg, Lawrence McGlynn, a reporter with Philadelphia Hall Monitor, and to Dennis Owens, anchor at ABC 27 in Harrisburg. Last week, Governor Josh Shapiro delivered his annual budget address. Dennis, what did you hear that stood out for you?
Well, in 87 minutes, which a lot of folks said was short for Josh Shapiro, he laid out a pretty bold $53.3 billion spending plan. That's a couple of billion more than the $50 billion plan that just passed in November. Remember, the budget was very late this last year. He would have a lot more money for schools. He wants to create a $1 billion, what he calls housing and infrastructure program. He wants to focus on the housing shortage in Pennsylvania. He would borrow money in order to do that. And predictably, a Republican response was, as Senate Republicans, it spends way too much. It uses too much of the rainy day fund. And in fact, the Independent Fiscal Office just came out this week and said it uses as much as $7 billion of the $7.5 to $8 billion rainy day fund, which Republicans fought so hard to protect in last year's budget. So they are, as you might imagine, saying spends way too much. But this is an election year. The budget process now underway. Now that the governor's given his address in the next couple of weeks in the Capitol, the State House and State Senate will have their appropriations hearings. Remember, this is an election year. The governor is up for re-election. All of the State House, half of the State Senate, all running for re-election. Last year, they didn't get the budget done until after Election Day. Usually insiders in Harrisburg say, well, they don't want to, give voters any reason to vote them out of office. Those budgets on election years are usually done easily. But I will tell you, this year, like last, there is a pretty big gulf in terms of how much the governor wants to spend and how much Republicans seem willing to spend. So let the games begin, as they say.
Tirzah, what did you hear during the speech?
Yeah, so some other things that the governor wants to do is, again, three revenue sources that, amidst heavy lobbying last year, still didn't get done, which was legalize recreational marijuana and then close a corporate tax loophole, which would force national companies to pay more taxes in the state, and also regulate so-called skill games. Some other things that the governor wanted to do was take $100 million from the rainy day fund and create a federal response fund for any costs that the Commonwealth could acquire by as a result of any federal quote actions or inactions. But another thing that Shapiro pitched was to take $100 million from revenue that comes from tax credit sales to insurance companies to create a state innovation fund for clinical trials, university research, et cetera.
Lawrence, what did you hear during the speech?
Well, one of the key things I was looking for is what's going to happen with transit funding. In Philadelphia, we have SEPTA, Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority, which over the summer said we're going to have to roll back service to up to 20% and in order to make their budget. And those were overturned. Those cuts were overturned in court. But it creates a big problem for Philadelphia, which is really dependent on mass transit for people to get around, get to work. With those kind of cuts, which of course affected the most needy people, the people who don't have cars, who are trying to get to work every day, it's a big problem for us. And kicking the can down the road a little bit more is a concern.
Bill, it's not ironic or not. It's interesting that that it was the day before Groundhog Day, or day after Groundhog Day, that the governor gave his budget address, because like Groundhog Day, things kept repeating, calling for a tax on skill games. We've been doing that for a couple of years, calling for legalizing recreational marijuana, been doing that for a couple of years. As to the mass transit, he wants to take more of the sales tax that the state takes in, because right now a smaller percentage goes to that, wants to increase that percentage of the sales tax take and let that go to mass transit. Senate Republicans, when it comes to mass transit, have mostly had a collective yawn. Keep in mind, though, this is an important year. It's America's 250, and the center of that is Philadelphia, and there's going to be a lot of visitors to Pennsylvania and Philadelphia specifically. They're going to need to get around, especially if they're from other countries that have world-class mass transit. And, what's Philadelphia got might be one of the questions.
Dennis, you've covered budget processes over the years. Now, the governor's address is filled with a lot of spectacle, a lot of pomp and circumstance. But from here to the end of June, it doesn't always get as much attention. How much transparency do you think is in the process behind the budget?
In what really ends up happening, not as much as I would like as a reporter that's sitting in front of the First Amendment and would like to have a little bit more of that. It seems that things do get done behind closed doors. Ultimately, we do find out what is in it, and I was struck. I don't know if my colleagues were struck. I felt the governor went out of his way to kick the Senate Republicans in the shins on the statute of limitations issue. So that is also, like Groundhog Day, has been a long-standing issue in Pennsylvania politics that would allow childhood victims of sexual abuse to sue their abusers after the statute of limitations ran out. For your viewers, it was passed in 2 sessions, but Governor Wolf had a clerical error, didn't properly announce it, so it was just dropped. And now the fight is, how do we get it back? I mean, I think many sides agree the victims do deserve that. But the governor, in very pointed terms and through an elbow, saying, listen to the victims. You haven't listened to the victims. He specifically said you're doing the bidding of the Catholic Church and the insurance industry, and kind of called them out. That issue is not budget related. It's not dollars and cents. And if you're asking me what struck me too, there was a lot more policy than there was specifics on dollars and cents in my view.
Lawrence, when you're covering the city government, do you get a sense that the members of the city council and the mayor's office are paying attention to the state level budget?
Oh, absolutely. So much of what we do in the city here depends on what happens in Harrisburg. And just in general, when we look at city operations, SEPTA, almost anything that operates in the city, when the budget's late, it creates a lot of problems because agencies don't know how to plan for it. And they get stuck in this place where they have to borrow money, and it costs them more in the long run if there's a late budget. But yeah, it's very important to what happens here in the city.
Tirzah, you're also looking at the Harrisburg government. Is it the same thing that you find there too?
Yeah, the Harrisburg government has been having its own set of drama locally, where in December, council voted to defund 4 key personnel in the mayor's administration. The mayor vetoed their cuts. Council overrode her vetoes. And then they ended up going to court because the new year, Harrisburg started without a business administrator who's the chief of staff to the mayor and oversees most departments. The judge ended up dismissing the lawsuit, saying council did act within its authority to defund those positions. But 2 days ago, good news for Harrisburg, the mayor and council came to an agreement about greenlighting $280,000 back to 3 positions, and we will have a business administrator soon. The lawsuit did end up costing over $10,000 to Harrisburg taxpayers. But I also know something that Governor Shapiro has been involved in is downtown revitalization, and how Harrisburg's downtown has been, post-COVID, amongst many other factors, less state workers, less foot traffic, restaurants and, favorite spots have been closing down. But I know Shapiro has been meeting with Mayor Wanda Williams and other stakeholders, and PennLive's also been holding forums just to help understand what the city can do moving forward.
So as you've been following this lawsuit between the mayor and the city council, what is the state of the relationship between those two right now, and where do they go from here?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I attended all of the city budget hearings all of December, and the mayor and city council, both of them cite lack of communication as one of their key problems. The mayor doesn't attend city council meetings. And city council has told reporters that the mayor has some of their numbers blocked, et cetera. But I know moving forward, I actually spoke with the mayor's spokesperson this morning, and what she said was the mayor is still planning to kind of stay out of council meetings, but have the business administrator go to all those meetings and try to work on that communication. But yeah, we have yet to see what will happen this year.
Dennis, you've written about the Pennsylvania General Assembly having a surplus. Can you explain what the purpose of the surplus is and what its significance is?
Well, it's interesting. So you talked about transparency, and there's an interesting story on this. So there's a thing called the Legislative Audit Advisory Commission, and I hope your eyes haven't glazed over at that. But every year that the day of the budget address, but 2 hours earlier, they meet. The meeting is all of 11 minutes. There might be less than 11 people in it. And what the purpose of it is to lay out or approve the audit of the pot of money that the General Assembly has for doing what it needs to do. Now, the reason for that pot of money traditionally was if we get in a protracted budget standoff with the governor, we don't want to be forced into a bad deal and having to cave because he's got all the money and we can't pay our people. Well, subsequently, courts have ruled you got to pay them if they show up. We just had a long protracted budget standoff that went till November, and everybody got a paycheck. There wasn't a paycheck missed. So critics argue the reason for that pot of money no longer exists, but nonetheless, they keep sending money for its own operations, and that the number is now $307 million in that reserve account. Many years ago, when Josh Shapiro was the state representative, he's now the governor, he was the chair of this very commission that I'm talking about, the LLAAC, which meets one time a year in public. And he said, look, we can debate what the numbers said. If we have 3 months operating expenses, that would be fine. That's what Shapiro said at the time. In today's numbers, that would be about $120 million, but they're sitting on $300 million, which almost everybody agrees. I had Joe Pittman, Kim Ward, they all agree that's too much money and we got to work to bring it down. They've been saying that to me, like, let's go back to the Groundhog Day analogy. Been saying that for years, but it is still steadily growing. It was $299 million last year. Now it's $307 million, this reserve pot of money. And by the way, that's taxpayer money.
Dennis, does that money roll over from year to year? Is there a requirement?
It does. Whatever they don't spend, and that's what the audit is, whatever they don't spend and save, put money aside, and then they keep giving themselves appropriation on that.
Now, you quote in your article about it, you quote Eric Epstein from Rock the Capitol. He says, it's the same evasiveness every year. There's absolutely no opportunity for the public to speak. There's no recommendations from the auditor.
Well, you mentioned transparency, and this is Exhibit A. So they come in, they gavel in, they establish who the officers are. We hear something from the auditor for about 4 minutes, but he doesn't really give specifics. And they vote to approve an audit, which they have not released the audit. So as a member of the media, and this is probably why a lot of media members aren't there, because A, they're focused on the bigger budget, which is coming in 2 hours, or B, we're not getting answers anyway. They release it online several hours later. So how are you supposed? So they've just approved the audit without publicly releasing the audit. So we don't know what it is until, as I said, several hours later. So we can't really even ask appropriate questions. And then the auditor would not take questions either. Usually the people on the commission scurry out of there as quickly as possible, kind of like when you turn the light on and the insects run away. And I don't mean that's that. I think also by design they put people on this commission that are lower level representatives and senators so that they don't have to answer the tough questions about where the money is being directed, because those folks aren't the ones in control of that pot of money.
Is there a sense of, does the audit show what the money has been used for over the past year?
Well, it doesn't talk about qualitative stuff. It just says make sure, okay, we spent this much here, and make sure that the dollars and cents add up. But it's not an audit of, okay, we need tighter controls on this, or whatever. It doesn't really get into those specifics.
Lawrence, in Philadelphia, you've been covering some of the education policies there, and there is a new public school plan that could see 20 schools close. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the school district periodically will put out a report that determines, well, do we have enough population in this school? Do we have enough in this school? And as you can imagine, if the reports at one school, there would be an uproar. This time it's 20, which we did not expect. And what you're seeing now are community groups saying, well, if you close the school, that means it takes an extra hour for my kid to get to school. We're seeing a lot of this. And you have politicians in city council who are saying, well, now we're going to get involved. And the council president came out last week and said, we have no problem holding back funds from the school district if this plan is not revisited and looked at again.
Now, there's also a proposal that would allow the city council to remove members of the Board of Education. Where did that come from, and what are the chances of that getting approved?
So this is kind of an interesting story. In our school district, the school board is appointed by the mayor. She puts up 27 candidates, of which 9 are selected, and those 9 become the school board. However, they have to be approved by council. One of the members of the school board, who was an incumbent, was not going to get those votes, withdrew the nomination, and then was unilaterally appointed by the mayor and is now on the school board. And nobody quite knows if that's legal or not. The administration says it is, and they have a court opinion that says it is, but they'll never show it to us. I've asked for it. I've never gotten that opinion. City council has tried to play nice about this, but this legislation really is for that reason, I believe. It's kind of maybe a shot across the bow to say, well, we can't play games like this with the school board.
Lawrence, I'm curious to know what the policy on interim officials is in Philadelphia, because in Harrisburg, in the lawsuit, that was one of the big issues, was that the mayor, 2 of the defunded positions, the reasons they were defunded that council provided was that they were both interim positions. So those officials had been appointed by the mayor, but then there's a 120-day limit for acting officials according to city law. But the mayor argued that because city law doesn't define interim officials, they can stay for however long. And in their agreement, in their settlement agreement, they agreed that the mayor will not be able to keep interim officials after that 120-day limit. So
that has never come up in this case. We asked about something like that, but what we were told is because this person had already been on the school board, it wasn't necessary to have the council vote, which is strange because they put other incumbents up who did get the council vote. So it was some maneuvering there.
Tirzah, one of the other elements of the Harrisburg budget process was that the mayor requested a $20,000 raise for herself and raises for other members of the city controller, the treasurer, and 6 council members. Why did she request that raise, and what happened to it?
Yeah, her argument was that other cities in Pennsylvania, which is true to a certain extent, so council members actually in other cities like Easton, York, Lancaster, some of them make more than what council members in Harrisburg make. But Harrisburg council members are also part-time workers for city council. The mayor argued that, the last time there was the mayor of Harrisburg received a raise was almost 2 decades ago. So, but ultimately it did not get passed. Council voted that down as well.
Dennis, you recently wrote about Representative Seth Grove, and he resigned from his position in the state legislature. There was an issue of a conflict of interest. What was the conflict of interest?
Well, so Seth Grove was a sitting state representative from York County, Republican, who announced that he was not going to seek re-election. But during the course of that, okay, so he's not running for re-election, but he was approached and accepted a job with it's a statewide aggregate and concrete trade group that basically the stuff that goes on roads, they put down roads trade. And Seth is the minority chair of the Labor and Industry Committee. So things are coming through his committee that, in theory, could impact that industry that he's going to be the head of. He argued initially, people said, hey, that's a conflict of interest. He said, well, I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not going to lobby. But the fact of the matter is, maybe not filling out the paperwork to be a lobbyist, but if you are the head of a trade group, you are in fact lobbying for your members and their interests. So we went to talk to him about it, and he right after a labor and industry committee meeting, and he gave good answers. He said, "Look, I know what a conflict is. I will just recuse myself, as lots of people do through the years in the legislature. Just recuse yourself from a vote," and that's what he said. The meeting was over about 12. He told me that about 12:15. I come back. I'm working on my story, and I hear about 2:30. Oh, he just tendered his resignation. Now, the interview with me there was nothing contentious about it at all, but there were a number of different people saying that's a conflict of interest. You shouldn't be doing it. I even heard from some Republicans that didn't. They were a little squeamish about the arrangement because he was basically having two jobs and two paychecks. So he just decided to resign effective January 31st.
Lawrence, one of the topics that you've been looking at is how the Philadelphia city government is responding to ICE actions around the country. There are two council members that have introduced a package of bills and resolutions in response to these. What would those bills do? What are they seeking to accomplish?
Well, on the whole, what they try to do is limit the city's ability to work with ICE. So what are called 287 agreements are agreements between law enforcement and federal law enforcement about detainers and things like that. And detainer is when somebody's arrested, they go to the local prison, and the government can say, well, we'd like to request that you hold them for us, even if they're getting out. And the city won't do that now. It prohibits ICE from operating on city land. Some of the legislation says they can't wear masks. So this legislation is actually in response to what happened in Minnesota. I feel like this legislation may have been in the background, and they needed an opportunity to bring it out. The thing that makes it more interesting in the city is our mayor has been largely silent about ICE. And the belief is she doesn't want to draw the ire of the Trump administration into Philadelphia. City council has questioned that decision. Maybe we should be more proactive. And I think that's what this legislation is about. It was just introduced, hasn't gone to committee yet. We expect to know what committee it's going to go to next week, probably.
Tirzah, have you seen the Harrisburg city government addressing these types of issues?
Yes, there have been conversations that have come up during city council meetings that I attend, a lot of public comment asking for more protection. And there were a couple council members who said they would be introducing legislation to limit how much the city can work with ICE, but nothing solidified yet.
Dennis, one of the seemingly perennial problems, you mentioned Groundhog Day, it seems to be a going theme, is the issue of skill games. And you say that most lawmakers in the Pennsylvania legislature agree that skill games industry should be regulated and taxed, but yet people don't seem to be able to arrive at an agreement. What's holding up an agreement?
Well, on the one hand, nearly every lawmaker, and this is unusual for an issue like this, nearly everybody says something needs to be done and have been saying that for a long time. So why hasn't it? Well, the fact is there's some thorny issues in there. First of all, there's a fight between casinos and these skill games. Initially, casinos, one of them eliminated altogether, saying they're cutting into our business. Now the casino's argument is, well, our slot machines are taxed at 54%. That's what the skill games should be. And by the way, these skill games have turned up in all kinds of places, even convenience stores. I heard of a dog grooming facility here in central Pennsylvania that has them. Why, I don't know. But so you have to figure out, where are they allowed to be? There seems to be consensus around you have to have a liquor license or at least sell lottery tickets at your place. Know you're dealing with adults. Where can the machines go? How many of them can there be? The thorny issue of what's the tax rate? Tax rates in bills that are out there are as low as 16% and as high as 52%, which is what the governor would like to see. 52%. He has, by the way, he has revenues slated in his budget for both skill games and marijuana, and neither of those things exist. So, there's a lot of work to do, and I think that's wishful thinking on some of his revenue numbers. Additionally, the Supreme Court is ruling whether or not they've heard the arguments. We're waiting on the ruling. Should come this spring. Whether or not they're legal. Are they gambling? Are they not gambling? So that ruling is yet to come. Some lawmakers say, well, let's wait until the Supreme Court rules before we go ahead and do our law as to how we're going to handle this. Other people are saying let's move ahead now. And, because if you pass a law right now and the governor signs, it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court says at that point, because then that would be the law. But there's mixed reviews on who wants to wait. And the other thing is there's bad blood as well between lobbyists from the skill game industry and Senate Republicans who were threatened because what skill games are out there, this is part of the problem, they're already out there, they're everywhere, and they're in legions and they're in VFWs, and no politician wants to be perceived as harming legions and VFWs. And so I think skillfully, the skills games people skillfully have wrapped their product around the mom apple pie legions and VFWs, and if you try to hurt them, you're hurting those folks. And so that has created some issues, and they actually threatened to give primary candidates to the politicians that are supporting the higher tax rate. So in a big word, it's a word we use a lot around Harrisburg, it's a mess. And it's been several years and still nothing's getting done. And oh, by the way, every day nothing's getting done, somebody somewhere is making millions of dollars on these things. Not the state, by the way. The state is not.
Dennis, what are you covering this week, and where can people find your work?
Well, I'm just getting into the governor's property dispute with a neighbor, a fence and a property line, and state police are involved in the whole thing. Speaking of a mess, we got another mess there. So working on that. I'm at abc27.com.
Lawrence, what are you looking at, and where can people read your work?
We are starting our budget coverage, which is the mayor's going to have the budget address in March, so we get everybody ready for it, and you can find us at hallmonitor.org.
And Tirzah, where can people see your work?
At PennLive.com, and I'm looking at state spending.
Well, our guests have been Tirzah Christopher, Capitol Affairs investigative reporter with PennLive Patriot News in Harrisburg, Lawrence McGlynn, a reporter with the Philadelphia Hall Monitor, and Dennis Owens, anchor at ABC 27 in Harrisburg. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'm Phil Beckman. Thank you for watching.
Full episodes of politics and policy content like the program you just listened to are available to stream with the PCN Select app. Discover other shows like the Capitol Preview, On the Issues, candidate interviews, and more. To learn more about PCN's mission and to support PCN with a donation, visit PCNTV.com. This link and others can be found in our show notes. We appreciate your support.